So in this our part 2 of the Framer tutorial series, we're going to be running through some basic builds, and we'll talk a little bit about how to start building your portfolio website. This video, once you finish it, should be enough to get you off and running to actually working on your project. And we can talk more about specifics later in other classes, but for now, the goal is just to get you moving. So let's take a look. So by now you should be familiar with some of the tools that are available for you to use in Framer. I'm not going to go into too much detail about each tool as I use it. I am just going to be walking through my thought process in starting to build a website. Okay, so to start off, let's go and create a navigation bar. So I'll go to my F tool, which brings me a frame by hitting the F key on my keyboard, and I'll actually just draw in a nice little navigation bar. So I'm going to make this about 80 pixels tall, and now I have a nice blue navigation bar. We'll change the color of that in a minute, but before I jump in and do that, I want to use the border tool over on my right hand side, which we looked at in the video before this one, to add a border to my nav bar, but I don't want to add it to all sides of my nav bar. So I'm going to click this button here, which is a borders per side button, and that will give me access to 4 parameters for my border. We have T, R, B, and L, top, right, bottom, and left. Now I only want a border on the bottom of my nav bar here, so I'm going to select 0 for everything except bottom border, and I'm going to choose a lighter gray color just to give a nice little separation here. I'll close this menu out, and you can see that I've added a little bit of a border if your screen resolution is high enough anyway, or my video output is high enough. And now that I have that border, now that I won't lose sight of where my nav bar is, I'll change the fill color. I'm going to change that fill color to white, and we'll take a look. And now I have a nice simple navigation bar. So we talked a little bit about this before, but one thing you can do in Framer is you can actually just jump in and grab an image for, like, say, your logo, and you can drop it directly into your frame. It should automatically pop it right into your page. And so you'll see here I have a file called logoipsum297.svg. I'm going to grab that and I'm going to drop it into my frame up here. So now that I have that logo file on my page, I'm going to reposition it and put it inside of my nav bar here. Just over here. And you can see I was having a bit of trouble actually getting it onto my nav bar. Part of the reason is that Framer right now is trying to put this either at the top or bottom of my nav bar, but not inside the bar itself. If you run into a problem like that, one thing you can always do is go over to your layers panel, grab the new file you just added, and actually just drag it directly into that frame. Then you can move and position it, and it will stack appropriately into the frame. So now that we have our logo in place, what we'll do is we will add some text. So I'm going to hit the text key, and I'm just going to start creating little text boxes inside of my nav frame here. I'm going to call one of these home, and I'm going to actually change a couple of things about this in just a minute, but then I'm going to create a new one over here, and it's going to be called contact. So you see I have a bit of a text overflow issue when this box gets smaller, and that's because I didn't click to type. I drew a text frame box. We can change this though over in the side panel when we have our text selected. So I'll select both pieces of my text here, and I'll go over to the size panel. When in the size panel, I can choose to have the width fit content, and I can have the height fit content. And now my text boxes are going to always be exactly the right size for the text content that's inside of them. I'll move this just over here, and now I have a functional, if not a little bit boring, header for my site. This is a great first step. I'm going to take a look at adjusting some things with my text now. So in the text styles panel, I can go over here and I can select text styles. It'll give me a list of text styles that are predetermined by the Framer team, but I'm going to select new style. I'm going to create a new style and I'm going to call it nav links, so I know what this style is being used for. You'll see when I create that style, it overrides a couple of the things that were already on my text at the top bar there. Now, the reason it's doing that is because a new text style is based on an existing text style. So this text style is based on sort of my basic paragraph style. I'll choose a new font. In this case, I'm going to choose Lato. Here we go. I'll choose this here. I will choose the font weight to be bold, maybe black, maybe regular. And then I'll choose the transform. I want all of these letters to be uppercase. And I want my text size to be a little bit smaller, so I'll drop it down from 18 to say 13. And there we go. Now I'll realign things to where I kind of want them to be, and I'll move things just over here. So now I have a nice top bar where everything is sitting in the spaces I'd like them to sit. Once you've created a top bar, a really great thing to do is to turn it into a component so you can reuse it anywhere. We've seen this before because we've worked with components in Adobe XD. Before we make it a component, one thing I think is really smart to do is to turn this into what is called a stack. So the stacking tool in Framer works just like Flexbox does if you're familiar with the way Flexbox works in CSS. I know not many of you would be, but I digress. We'll select the entirety of our component here, but we'll actually be focusing on just making sure we have the frame selected here in our layers panel. So with the frame selected, we're going to change our layout style over in the right-hand panel. By clicking plus, it will automatically create a stack. Now the stack, you'll see, has reflowed all of the elements inside of our header. Everything is now in the center, has a little bit of space between it, but it doesn't look the way we had it before. The way we can make this work for us is by selecting the frame, which is now actually columns. You'll see in your layer panel. We're going to add a little bit of a gap between the elements first, so we have some nicer spacing between the things in here. And then we're going to add a little bit of padding. So we want to add a little padding around the top, bottom, left, and right. You won't see it because we are quite far from the edges right now, but trust me, it's there. And then we're going to go in and we're going to add a spacer element. Now, a spacer element might sound like a new element we haven't talked about before, but all we're going to do to add a spacer is hit F with our frame key, and we're going to draw inside our header a spacer frame that we can make as wide as we'd like. And once we have the right width set up for this, we're just going to set the opacity on our right-hand bar to 0. So now everything is framed up again the way we want it to be. And if we select this bar that we just added, our frame, that's a spacer, I would recommend you rename it over in your layers panel to spacer so you know exactly what it is. With that spacer selected, we can choose to have its size fill. If we choose the size fill, it will fill the space around these sections in here. So that's going to give us a really great, easy way to resize this down the road. So if we copy this and we put it over here and we start to resize our header, you'll see it actively resizes the frame because this frame in here, this spacer, is filling whatever space is left over. So we've given each of these its own presence, and the spacer is only going to fill the space it can fill. Now we can create our component. So we'll grab this, and I'm going to hit Control, I think it's Command K on your MacBooks, and you'll get what's called the Quick Access menu. So I'm going to create a component here, and I'm going to call this component Nav. So now I have a navigation bar component all ready to go. That's step 1 in creating your Framer website. Great job. So now that I have my beautiful navigation bar, I'm going to add some text to my page. So I'll do that by selecting my desktop and hitting the T key to add text. And then I'm just going to draw in a text box. Once you've drawn in that text box, you have to make sure you start typing things in here without clicking away, or your text box will disappear. So I'm going to type in, hey, welcome to my very cool site. Keep it very simple for this one, and we can change the text anytime we want later by just clicking back into the text field. I'm going to select under Styles H1, which is my header style, and it will restyle my entire text block. I'm going to change some of the capitalization here just to make it proper, and then we will squash this down a little bit, and I'm going to edit this title style to make the size of my text actually a little bit bigger. I'm going to center all the text that's in this frame, and I'm just going to size it to where I think it works. And now that I'm done styling out my text, I'm going to actually make this text box have a height that's controlled by the amount of text that's actually inside of it. So if we take a look over at the right-hand bar, you can see on the size panel, we have a width, which is fixed, which is fine. And we have a height, which is 229 pixels, which is just kind of an abstract number. It's arbitrary. The reason it says 229 is because I stretched this text box out to this height. As you see, when I move it, that number on the right changes. So I'm going to change this to actually fit content. When we change it to fit content, it will become a text frame that's all encapsulated inside of itself. Now I can position and move this anywhere I'd like, but I'm just going to put it right here, center of my page, and I think that looks pretty good. We might make this a little bit bigger, and if we want to make this bigger, we can go back to our title styles and just make it a little larger through here, and then I would open this up a little bit more too. So there we go. We have a nice title header for our site. So now that we have our title up here, I'm going to add a link that will let people jump straight to contacting me in case they want to hire me for some work. That's, after all, part of the reason we're making a portfolio page. So I'll duplicate this text frame, and I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to create something that I think is a nice linkable call to action. So get in touch today, and I'm going to have this become a link. So I'll select all of this text, and I'll go up to my right-hand bar on the top here, and you'll see it says link. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to add a URL. Here, we're just going to add google.com, and you'll see it becomes linked. Now that this is all linked up, one thing we can do is we can go in here and edit the link style. Same way we edited the text style for our header, we can click in here and we can edit the link. So this won't give us as much control as the text style does, because we already control things in the text styling, like the size, the distance between letters and lines, things like that. But this will let us control things like text decoration and color. So I'm going to change the color to something a little more, let's say, orangey. And I will change the hover color to something a little orange as well, but maybe a little bit darker. And we'll say that that looks good. So now we'll close this, and we'll take a little moment to preview our site as it is currently. So I'll hit the play button. Now when I hover over my link text, you can see it changes color, and it shows as clickable, which is exactly what we wanted. With our link in place, I'm now going to create a little intro section here to show people who I am and what I'm all about. So to do that, I'm actually going to go up here and use the columns. So I'll click on columns, and I'll create a sort of centered 2-column spread. And when I say sort of centered, I just mean because I was just clicking and dragging things in. What I would actually do to make sure it's perfectly centered is use my alignment tools up at the top right up here. I'll click this and it will perfectly align it into the middle. So now that I have this, a couple of things I like to do as little bits of housekeeping when I add some elements. First, I'll create a larger gap between these elements because I think it's a little tight before. And I'm going to actually tune this down to exactly 40 pixels. And for padding, I'm going to add some padding around the edges of this, maybe 20 pixels, and that'll put 20 on each side of the combined columns. So this isn't applying to the frames inside, it's actually putting padding inside of here. So now that I have this, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to add an image. So I'm going to use this image tool, click here, and just turn this whole thing basically into an image. So I can choose an image that I'd like to have added here. I'm just going to move this off frame while I jump into my images folder, which is under my Framer portfolio build section, and here's a picture of me. And in this section over here, I'm going to write in some content that I want to have, so it will describe sort of what I'm all about and what I do. Hey, I'm Josh. This will be my first text that people see when they come in here. So I'm going to choose a style, and it might be a section header style, a section title style. So I'm going to edit this now, just like we edited our header before. I'm going to bump up the type size a little bit. And that looks pretty good to me. I'll also go over here and change the size so that it fits the content. And then I'm going to duplicate this. And as soon as I duplicate it, I'm going to go down here and change the style again. So this is just going to be my paragraph style. So now I'll take some text and I'll just fill it in here. And what beautiful design would be complete without some lorem ipsum? So now that I have some text in here, I'm going to move this box around a little bit, maybe resize a couple of these elements. And what I will do at this stage is I'll take these and I'm going to turn them into, using this element here, a new layout style. So I'm going to turn this into a stack by selecting the frame that both my text boxes appear inside of. I'll select this outer frame and I'll choose layout, and it will turn it into a stack, which, as you can see, has automatically centered these pieces. It's given me a handle that I can control between my title and my body copy text so I can space things out. And once I'm happy with the way this looks, I'm going to take away the color of the frame behind it. So I'll go down here to my fill style. I'll select my color and I'll turn this to white, and I always do white and then 100%, I turn that to 0% opacity. So there we go. Now I have the beginnings of a real looking portfolio website. I have a little feature thing about me, and I have a little header that shows off a little bit of my cool creative writing style. A major part of using a platform like Framer correctly, quote unquote, is making sure that you're not doing work that you don't need to do. I think it's really smart to try to cut corners in a really effective way, in a way that makes sense and isn't going to cause the end result of your site to be worse by the time you're finished. So one way I suggest, taking a bit of a shortcut, is using some of the layouts that they've already built under the Insert tool in the top left here. We'll click here. And I'm building a portfolio site, so what I really want to do is I want to showcase some of the work that I do. So after my introduction section, which I did build on my own, I'm going to add in a section right here that looks like it could work for showcasing some of my work. Now, as soon as I lay it in, you'll see that maybe I could resize this box here to make it fit a little bit more in line with these ones, and I'll do that here. I'll resize some of these elements just to make them fit a little bit more nicely. And there we go. We have a beautiful start to our portfolio site. I can then take and drag in some imagery here. I'll choose image. I'll go and I'll add my first bit of work. I'll go in here and I'll add my next bit of work. And then you can change all of this text and you can change all this copy, but you can see very quickly it's starting to look much more like a portfolio site. And when we preview this, you can see all of these things are just in place. They're kind of working. You can give this to somebody and they could see the work that you've done. Now, one thing I would love to include is a button. So buttons are included under the Patterns tool. I'm going to drop the button in here on this one, and I'm going to work on this button before I move it over to the next section. So I'll change this copy. I'm going to change this to say, check out this work. So you'll see the button auto sizes, and you can control all those parameters up here. This right now is auto width, auto height. I like it like that. It makes it very simple to work with. I'm going to copy this button and I'm going to bring it outside of this frame. Or maybe we'll take it and copy it and paste it with Control C, Command C, and Command V. Paste it directly into the next section. So we can link these up to pages once we have other pages built. But for now, I mean, this is looking pretty good. This looks like it could be a portfolio site. Some of the colors are a little bit crazy that I've chosen, but that's okay. And you can choose to center your content really easily by using your layout section over here. I've just chosen to align everything to center, so everything feels a little more balanced in my site. So we'll add just 2 more sections to our site before we start looking at converting this to mobile. One thing that I like to say is that I like to feature my strongest work up top, and then I would like to maybe add a section below for all the work that I still want people to be able to find on my site, but that I don't think is as impactful as the 2 I've selected up here. So I'll go to the insert section again, and I'm going back to this sections portion. I'm going to pick something like this maybe, or something like this, more of a grid-based thing, and I'll drop this in, and I'll showcase a couple more pieces of work that I want people to be able to see. I'm going to actually expand my desktop a little bit here, and when I take a look at what we have, I might only want 3 more pieces of work, because to have 6 down here and 2 up here, 8 feels like it could be a little too much for what I want to do. So I'm going to actually select these content sections here. You can see in my layers panel, I can select the rows independently. So I'll pick the bottom 3 rows, and I'm actually just going to delete them. I don't need them. I just want these 3 here. And similar to what we did before, I'm going to double click on here and choose some imagery. In our case, we're going to use the same image all the way across because, to be totally honest, these are the images I sourced for showcasing this platform. And there we go. Now we have a lovely looking site where we have our columns, 2 columns up here, 3 columns down here, showcasing the work I've done. And the final piece I'm going to add to this is, again, one of these custom content sections that we have over here, but it's going to be under navigation. I'm going to choose to add a footer, and I'm going to super simplify this footer by pulling out, well, I'm going to go into the component, I'm going to select most of the content that's in here and actually remove it. So we can select it, delete, 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 and I'm going to type in copyright 2023, Josh Incorporated. And you can have your social links over here. They can link to whatever you'd like. You can see it reflows depending on what size you'd be looking at in your component section as well, based on the changes you made to the desktop. Very convenient. So we'll move this up a little bit, and we're going to resize our desktop just by clicking and dragging. Great. So now I have what I would consider a fully functional first page of my site. You can imagine that to build other pages of this site, what you would do is follow the same steps, use what you think you can use from the insert panel if you'd like, but know that you can always build these sections as custom. We're just trying to save a little bit of time here and there to make sure that we get these things put in correctly. So let's take a look at building this out to tablet size and mobile size. Okay, let's jump into turning this into mobile. So the first step is we want to click this plus icon next to our desktop frame. That will give us the option to choose tablet or phone. We're going to do both, so I'll choose tablet first, and then I'll choose phone. I always do them all at the same time because I like to see the sizing. I like to see how things are working on these pages before I start making any drastic changes. Something good to remember is that when you're working on a size, anything below desktop is going to operate in a flow down sort of way. So if you make a change on desktop, it will change on mobile and tablet. If you make a change on tablet, it will change on tablet only. And if you change on mobile, it will only change on mobile. So good to remember, any change you make to your desktop will flow down, but any changes you make to the other 2 will not. So at this stage, all we really have to do is start looking at a little bit of reorganization. So we'll take here our section title. I'm going to actually edit this style. So when I go into edit this style, you can see under breakpoints, we don't have any breakpoints on this style yet. I'm going to add a couple. So I'll select add breakpoints. And now I have a breakpoint for my tablet size, which automatically chooses a smaller size. And I have a breakpoint for my mobile size, which also sizes things down. I'm going to just leave those sizes as they show up there. I'm going to do the same thing for my title breakpoints. I'm going to click on my title. I'm going to hit edit. I'm going to add breakpoints here as well. So you'll see it's made things a little bit smaller depending on the screen size I'm looking at, which is a very convenient way to start working. First thing we'll do is I'm going to move some of this content around to make sure that it's all fitting in the frames I expect they would fit in. So I'll size this down to fit next to my image the way I want it to fit. And you'll see that on mobile, this is automatically reflowed. This is one of the advantages of using stacks, is that you'll have an automatic reflow of the content you have in stacks. Now, inside my frame, you can see that I've lost a little bit of some of my text because this text is obviously quite large. So generally the approach I would take is I would start with my desktop, make sure everything looks good. I would then take a look at my tablet version, make sure everything looks good there, and move on. So I'm going to take a look from the top down here. Yep, this looks okay to me. This section looks all right. We would want to choose an image that has us nicely framed and centered so that when these things reflow, we don't necessarily get cut off. But if I wanted to, I could change the details about this image over here in my sizing category. Let's see what it looks like when we choose fixed, but lower the height a little bit. You see, it'll just shrink down the framing of that image so it fits a little bit better in the section that we're working with here. We can also reduce the size of this whole frame. We can take it and move it up a little bit. And you'll notice again, this only applies to the tablet version that we're working with right now. Let's take this section and move it up a little bit, and we'll take this section and move it up, and we'll reflow a couple of these things just to make sure they all sort of work. So here we have a little bit of a text overflow problem, and I'm going to fix that just by resizing these text boxes to fit a little better inside this frame. And there we go. We can also reduce the size of each one of these by, say, what I would do first steps is I would reduce the gap between them if possible. So let's see what we have here. We'll go to our layers panel and make sure we're selecting the right rows. So we have a grid of rows here. We have a 60-point gap. I'm going to reduce that gap down just a little bit here and make them fit a little more snugly, but a little more in line with everything else we have going on. And I'm going to reduce the padding on this section here to make sure that everything sort of aligns. If you have any questions about the alignment, one thing you can always do is pull a ruler over. Drop a ruler on the left and right side of your work, and then you can start to move things around and make sure everything fits exactly as you want. So with this ruler in place, I can start to control the padding of this section, line it up, and I can control the padding of this section and do the same thing. There we go. So we have a pretty good, if not perfect, alignment on these things now. Just maybe do a little bit of adjusting on this one just to make sure it's fitting right where we want it to. You can also change text styles between each section. So if I wanted to have maybe this text be like right aligned, left aligned, you can control it independently on each size. So here we're going to keep it left aligned, but over here I might want to have this text centered. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So this is looking okay. I'm going to move this footer up here, and I'm going to reduce the actual overall size by clicking on my tablet header up here and just dragging it down. So now we have a pretty good looking website for our tablet viewers. We'll do the same thing over here on our mobile page. It's going to be a bit trickier because mobile obviously is reflowing a bit differently. So we'll move this down into a smaller size. I'm going to move this down into a smaller size as well, so they stack the way I want them to stack. With this image, one thing we can do to save ourselves a lot of time is select the text frames, so they're in rows right now. We're going to change this so that the actual height of our rows is set to fit the content. Once we've done that, we can start to control some of these things, open this up a little bit more, and we can open up the gap on here, and it will expand automatically to fit the content that we have inside of our sections. We have to do a little bit of manual resizing of some of the type in here, but for the most part, it should be pretty automatic. Let's get back to our row selection. And when in doubt, it's always good to use the layer panel over here. I am going to change it back over to fixed for just a moment so I can open this up and make this text work a little bit more cleanly. I think what's actually happening is we have a couple of these sections that are overflowing into each other, so I'm going to move some of these down. Oops. I'm going to open up maybe the entire mobile page to be a little bit taller. You can do that again by clicking at the top bar with the phone here and dragging down. And we'll move all these elements down as well. And they should all snap to a line, so there's no worries about it getting out of alignment here. And there we go. Now you can see without that overlapping effect, all of this text fits nicely in this frame, and we have this nice picture. I'm going to select this text now, and I'm going to center it, because I think it looks better centered when you're scrolling through a site of this size. For this section here, we're going to move this back up, and we're going to change the way this fits. So right now we have this set to a stack, and we have everything centered. And because these are set up as a stack right now, you're going to see it's very easy to control and change the way that you have these things laid out. So first, I'll select the columns that these are actually operating inside of, not the frame outside. The frame outside is just our template frame, but we'll select the columns. And then we'll go over here to our layout menu, and you'll see the direction that these things are meant to flow. It's listed as left to right. For something to work on mobile, we often want it to work vertically. So we'll change to this vertical style layout. And you can see right away, we're already working with a nicely neat stack of text. I'm going to change all of this over to center aligned as well. And done. That's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll move this section up a little bit. Maybe I'll close some of the gap here on the top and bottom padding. And we'll go to our final section here. For the mobile version of our page, we're actually going to turn this bottom section into a carousel. If you take a look at it, it kind of already looks a little carousel-y, so I think this is a perfect time to use a tool like this. So in order to make a carousel, the first thing we have to do is actually break our layout a little bit. So we'll grab this and we'll pull it off the frame. We'll take a look at the larger overarching selector here, Grid 1. We're going to right click on that and we're going to remove stack. That will take away our grid frame. Now we'll see again, we have another grid that's framing this up. I'm going to right click on this one and remove the frame as well. That will give us 3 separate rows that are independent of being grouped inside of a grid. This is very important. If you don't see a header above each one of the sections you want as part of your carousel, you should definitely figure out which overarching layer is grouping them together that you want to get rid of. Once we've done this, we can go into our insert panel, we can choose carousel, and I'm going to drop the carousel right in here. I'll size it up and make sure it fits the way I want it to fit. But beyond that, we're going to actually remove it from that flow as well. I'm going to open it up maybe a little bit taller. Only when you remove it from the flow, for some reason, you'll get these 3 dots. I think it wants you to develop these things off your actual board itself and then bring it in and size it. So these 3 dots are the really important part. You remember in Adobe XD when we would click and drag to make connections and interactions between things? This works exactly the same way. It works on entire grouped sections. So each one of these rows is a grouped section of content. I'm going to actually take all of this text before we make any more changes, and I'm going to center everything because it's going to look a lot better on our carousel with everything centered. Now I'll select my carousel. I'll grab this little 3-dot panel and I'm going to click and drag and add a connector to my first row. Do the same thing for my second and the same thing for the third. Once that's finished, I'm going to bring this back into the flow of my website design. And that's that. I'm going to move this footer up, and I'm going to jump back in and resize this page just a little bit. And now let's preview what our carousel looks like. So we'll probably want to preview it on the actual mobile version. And when we scroll down, you can see here we have a carousel with a clickable button, and it jumps section to section. So all of your carousel dreams can now come true when you use something like this. In the insert section, you'll see other interactive things like a ticker. A ticker will automatically flow through things, and you can set timers to those. And a slideshow is similar. You can sort of swipe through and view different images that you have set up. But I think the carousel is a great start. Just remember, you can't delete these items off of your board now because they are all linked, and when you select them, it will show you they're all linked to your carousel slider here. So that's it. We have our 3 pages fully designed portfolio site. I think that this whole tutorial should totally help you build your portfolio. Be creative. Do weird things with your portfolio, step outside the box a little bit, and make sure you take a look at the sections, the pages, and the navigation tools they have at your disposal here on Framer's Basics section under the Insert tab. I think you'll find something that will give you a great head start on building your site. So anyway, this has just been a quick overview of some of the tools. Take it from here. Now you jump in, learn what you need to learn using Framer's other educational tools, and I can't wait to see your portfolio set when it's ready. Excellent. Thanks.